Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today's day 44 in our 90-day SAT Prep series. Today I'll be teaching you how to pace the Math No Calculator section based on question difficulties and what I know as someone who's scored back-to-back perfect scores on the math section of the SAT. And then after that, we're going to switch over and do about 25 to 30 minutes with the SAT writing section. So just one thing that I'm going to go ahead and state is I'm making a separate video on pacing the Math No Calculator section that's going to be uploaded individually. Okay, that same video, it's going to start playing here in about 30 seconds. Okay, so that video, it's going to be uploaded individually and you're going to see it here in about 30 seconds. So you don't have to switch and go find it because I'm going to upload it within today's video as well. Okay, so that's just one thing to keep in mind. So with that, let's go ahead and start with pacing the Math No Calculator section. Today I'll be taking you through how to pace the Math No Calculator section. Keep in mind, I'm someone who's scored perfectly on the math section of the SAT on back-to-back SATs, so I'll really be trying to give you insight into how you can pace the Math No Calculator section and use a strategy in order to increase how efficient you are in taking the Math No Calculator section and improve your chances at seeing easier questions earlier on and maximizing your odds at a higher score. So really trying to help you strategize based on the way that the SAT Math No Calculator section works. So I'll be giving you insight into how it's organized and how you can use that organization to maximize your chances to get points. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, also make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And let's go and get started with number one. Okay, so the first thing we need to understand with how we're going to pace the Math No Calculator section is we need to understand how the difficulty of the questions is arranged. Okay, so what we need to know is that the difficulty of each question on the Math No Calculator section is different, okay? There are questions that are easier and questions that are harder, okay? So we have questions that are multiple choice, which are the questions 1 through 15. They get more difficult as we go on, right? They increase in difficulty as we go from problem 1 to problem 15, okay? After problem 15, we have problems 16 through 20. Now, problems 16 through 20, those are free response. So there are no A through D. You have to come up with your own answer and then fill in the bubble sheet. So while the questions get more difficult as we go from 1 through 15, from 15 to 16 we actually see a drop in difficulty because questions 16 through 20, they start at that fairly easy difficult level, right? And then they grow increasingly more difficult as you go from 16 to 20. But question 16 is generally easier than question 15 because we drop in difficulty from the end of that multiple choice section to that start of the free response section of the Math No Calculator. Okay, so if we understand that, we can adopt a strategy to take advantage of that and make sure that we're answering the easiest questions or the easier questions rather than the harder questions first. That way, we're making sure we're maximizing our chances at getting points. Okay, so here I'm going to give my opinion on difficulty equivalencies. So what do I mean by difficulty equivalencies? Well, the free response questions, right? We know that question 16 is easier than question 15 of the multiple choice, right? So if we understand that, we want to understand how difficult each free response question is in comparison to the multiple choice. That way we're not answering question 15 on the multiple choice, which is super hard, and then leaving question 16 of the free response, which is generally easier, blank because we ran out of time. So in order to do that, we need to understand what they're equal to, right? So in my opinion, question 16 of the free response is equal to questions 1 through 6 on the multiple choice. So what I mean by that is that if we were to take the 10 SAT practice tests that have been released, and we select question 16 from a random one of those 10 practice tests, okay? In my opinion, it's likely that the difficulty of that question 16 would be comparable to a question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 from one of the multiple choice sections, okay? Now, question 17, in my opinion, would be comparable to questions 4 through 9 on the multiple choice. So it could be comparable to question 4's difficulty, or question 7 difficulty, or question 9's difficulty. But either way, we see question 17, it's more than likely easier than whatever question 10 through 15 is. Okay, next, we've got question 18. In my opinion, question 18 of the free response is generally as difficult as questions 6 through 10 of the multiple choice. Okay, we see question 19. I believe that that one's generally equivalent in difficulty to questions 8 through 12 of the multiple choice. In question 20, we see that that's generally, in my opinion, equivalent to the difficulty of a question 9 through 12 on the multiple choice. So one thing you may notice is where is questions 13 through 15 here? We've talked about how questions 20 is equal to 9 through 12. Well, what are questions 13 to 15 of the multiple choice equal to? Well, they aren't equal to any free response, in my opinion, because in my opinion, they tend to be the most difficult. Okay, so questions 13 to 15, in my opinion, tend to be the most difficult on the SAT Math No Calculator section. So understanding this is going to affect our order in which we answer these questions because we want to maximize our points. Okay, so we want to make sure we're answering the easier questions before we go to the harder questions, because if we start doing the harder questions and we run out of time, then we just left those easy points on the table. Okay, so how is this going to impact our strategy? Well, this impacts our strategy because, like I said, we want to make sure that we're answering those easiest questions first, and we want to avoid wasting too much time flipping between pages. Okay, so these seem like two contrasting ideas, right? If we're going to be answering the easiest questions first, then wouldn't we want to do 1 through 6 of the multiple choice, then go do 16, then do 4 through 9, or then do 7, 8, and 9 of the multiple choice, then go do 17? Well, yes and no, okay? We want to make sure we're answering the easiest questions first, but at the same time, we want to avoid wasting too much time flipping between pages. Okay, so here's what I suggest. Okay, I suggest that we answer multiple choice questions 1 through 9 first. Okay, those generally are going to be fairly easy. Now they will grow more difficult from 1 through 9, but overall, as far as the SAT Math No Calculator section goes, they are fairly easy problems. Okay, so my recommendation is we answer those first. Okay, the second thing we're going to do is after we answer 1 through 9, at that point, we flip the pages over to the free response section and answer 16 to 18. Okay, so the reason that we do that is because if we were to just go and do 1 through 6, then go do 16, then do 7, 8, 9, then go do 17, then go do number 10, then go back to 18, we're wasting time flipping pages. Okay, so that's why I don't recommend that we just do that. Okay, because then we're wasting time flipping those pages, and I don't want to do that so much unless it's really worth it, which is why I want to answer multiple choice questions 1 through 9 first. Then at that point, I flip and I go answer those free response questions 16 through 18. Okay, by doing that, I've answered these easy problems first because these tend to be the easier problems of the Math No Calculator section. Then I'm answering the other easier problems of the SAT Math No Calculator section. So now what happens after I've answered questions 16 through 18? Well, at that point, if we look at our difficulty equivalence sheet, we see we have question 19. We know that that's equal to around 8 through 12 of the multiple choice. Well, we've already answered 1 through 9, so our next one would be 10. So do we answer 10 first or do we answer 19 first? Well, if they're equivalent in difficulty level, we want to make sure we're not wasting the time flipping the pages and going back and forth. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to try to stay right here with that free response if we can. So here's what I recommend, right? We just answered 16 through 18. We've already answered 1 through 9. At that point, what I recommend doing is glancing at questions 19 and 20. Okay, so just take a quick look at them, see how long they are, see if it's a really, really long word problem, see if it's just something that really stands out to you as a trick that I explained, such as adding to get rid of variables to solve for one. So that's one thing that you can do. And if you're watching this video not as part of our 90-day SAT prep series, I recommend going and watching our 90-day SAT prep series because I explain certain setups on the SAT math section that you can use to improve your score. So I'd recommend watching that. It's a 90-day SAT prep course. It's free on our channel, so you can go find that. This video is embedded in that 90-day SAT prep course, so if I make references to it, understand that that's why. I'm also releasing this as its own video, so there'll be a little bit of a go-between between those. But as I said, so once we answer 16 through 18, we want to take a look at 19 and 20. Now, if something jumps out to you as easy, right, if it jumps out to you as one of those patterns or tricks I've explained that can help you get to the answer choice very, very quickly, then go ahead and do them next, okay? If you look at 19 and you see a stacked equation sheet like I talk about, say it's 3x plus 2y equals 10, and say the next one is, we'll say the next one's also 3x minus 2y equals 20, right? And we have to solve for y. We see we can go ahead and use that subtraction there to get rid of x and then solve for y, right? So these 3x minus 3x is going to give us 0. So if you see something like that and it looks really easy to you, go ahead and do it next, right? If you see a pattern or a trick that I've explained, go ahead and use it next because that's going to be really easy and quick. Now, if you glance at 19 and 20 and you see that they're going to be difficult, right? You see it's going to be more like a 12 than something like an 8 or a 9 or a 10, right? You see it, you see, okay, this is going to take me like 3 minutes to solve. Then you're going to want to go ahead and go back and answer 10 through 15, okay? Because if 19 and 20 look really, really difficult, which it's possible that they could because they're at the end of the free response section, then at that point we'd say, okay, let me go back and answer 10 to 15 or 10 to 12, right? Oh, I'm sorry, hang on a minute. I just misexplained that, okay? So if they look easy to you, then you're going to go ahead and do them next. And then after you've answered 19 and 20, then you go back and answer 10 to 15. Now, if they look difficult, okay, if they look difficult and they look like they're going to take you 3 or 4 minutes to solve each, then you're going to want to go back and do 10 to 12 next, okay? Now, after 12, though, I recommend going back and answering 19 and 20 before we answer 13 and 15 because, like I said in my difficulty equivalence thing up here, we see 9 through 12 is equal to pretty much 19 and 20 here, right? 8 through 12 is 19, 9 through 12 is 20, but we see 13 to 15 are going to be the most difficult, generally. Okay, keep in mind this is in my opinion and it's generally. Okay, so in that situation, what we want to do is if we glance at 19 and 20 and they look difficult, then at that point we go back and answer 10 to 12. After answering 12 then we go back and answer 19 and 20 before we answer 13 to 15. That's in my opinion. Now, keep in mind, if you glance at 19 and 20 and they look easy, go ahead and do them next. Then at that point, all your free response questions are answered and you go answer 10 through 15. Okay, so that's what I recommend there. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If not, just take a look, right? I really outline this pretty clearly. Notice my steps here. I've got what I'm going to do first, and I'm going to put this in blue so you can see it. I've got what I'm going to do first, or I'll put it in, let's see, I'll pick a different color. I'll pick green. Give me one moment. I'm going to pick green. Okay, I'm going to put this in green so you can see it. Okay, notice how I put these in numbered order, and then they also have A and B, right? That's the order I suggest you do them in, right? So number 1, you're going to answer multiple choice questions 1 through 9. After that, you're going to answer 16 through 18. After that, you're going to take a look at 19 and 20, and then I provide 2 different pathways. So we have pathway A and pathway B. So this is where you're going to make a judgment call on your own. So you're going to glance at 19, 20. If they look easy, you go ahead and do them, and at that point, you just have to answer the rest of the multiple choice. If they look difficult, then go back and do 10 through 12 next, and then after 12, go back, answer 19 and 20, and then go do 13 through 15. Okay, so that right there, if you want to write something in your notes, this would be the big thing that I'd recommend writing in your notes if you're going to follow what I recommend. All right, so why is this approach smart? So let's really dive into why it's smart. Well, it's going to maximize our chances at points because answering questions 1, 2, or 3 is going to give us the same amount of points as answering 15 correctly. Okay, so the way the SAT math scoring works is it's just based on the number of correct answers you get over the number of possible correct answers you can get, right? So if you get, there are 58 total questions on the SAT math section. So the way your math score is calculated is it's the number you get correct out of 58, right? So there's a scale it'll have, but that scale is going to be based on the number of correct answers you get out of those 58 total. So what you're going to want to understand then is that you're getting the same amount of points for answering 1 correct as you get for answering 15 correct, or answering 2, right? Well, answering question 2 or question 3 or question 1 is much easier than answering question 15 because question 15 is going to be harder. So we're always going to want to make sure we're answering those easier questions first because we get the same amount of points for doing so. Okay, so that's why that's smart. Another reason it's smart is it prevents you from running out of time while you're working on a harder problem like problem 15. And then if you run out of time, you left points on the table because you probably could have solved 2 of those easier problems in the same amount of time it took you to solve that really hard problem. Okay, so in that sense, it's very efficient. Okay. Now, some people who are shooting for perfect scores on the math section, keep in mind I scored perfectly on the math section. If you're shooting for a perfect score and you think there's no chance you'll ever see a question you don't know, this is still a good strategy for you. Okay, you may be thinking, oh, I'm just going to go 1 through 15 as fast as I can. That way I don't even have to waste time flipping between sections. Okay, that's a bad strategy. Here's why you need to use our strategy still. Okay, the strategy that I recommend, it is the safest way. Okay, keep in mind if you're taking the SAT, usually it's only offered about once a month. Now, do you really want to have to stay fresh and stay studying for another month just because you decided not to take this strategy and you risk leaving points on the table? You don't, okay? You want to make sure you're playing it smart and playing it safe, and this is the best way to do that. So you're still going to want to use this strategy. It's worth it to take that extra 10 or 15 seconds it's going to take you to flip between those pages in order to make sure you're solving those easier problems first, okay? So understand that. Okay, now here's another big thing with the SAT Math No Calculator section. Okay, this is a question that I've gotten. How much time should I have left after I answer all my questions? So let's say you've taken this strategy that I've recommended. You've gone through, you answered, I'll go back up. You've gone through, you've answered questions 1 through 9. You answered 16 through 18 after that. Then you looked at 19, 20. They looked easy, so you went ahead and you solved them. Then you answered 10 through 15. Let's say you did that. How much time should that take you and how much time should you have left after doing that? Well, in my opinion, you should have about 10 to 8 minutes left to check your work if it's possible. So some people are really good at doing math in their head without a calculator like this, and they can finish all those 20 problems in about 15 minutes or 17 minutes. And if they can do that, they're going to have 10 to 8 minutes left to check their work. Now, having 10 to 8 minutes left to check your work on the Math No Calculator section, that's ideal in my opinion, And if you can do it, your math is very, very solid, you can solve those problems very quickly, then that's going to be great, because if you have 10 to 8 minutes left to check your work, you're going to be able to check your bubble sheet, you're going to be able to make sure that what you circled in your booklet matches what you put in your bubble sheet, and you're going to be able to check any problems that were a little bit more difficult or that you went a little bit quickly through, and you're just going to be able to make sure that everything is correct as you want it to be. So that's very, very helpful. Now, some people can't finish that quickly. I fully acknowledge that. Now, I think that it's certainly possible to finish in 15, 17 minutes. I have videos where I go through solve the math no calculator section in about 10 minutes. I definitely think it's possible to finish in 15 to 17 minutes accurately, without question, especially once you learn the tips and tricks to the math section. So if you want to see those, go visit our 90-day prep course. I really outline a lot of the tricks you can use to solve them quicker in that course. So I recommend that. Now, let's say that you struggle to finish math no calculator section very quickly. Let's say it normally takes you about 20 minutes to finish all the questions. Well, once again, at least just try to make sure you have all the questions answered with 5 minutes left. Now, if you can, I understand for some people it's difficult, but if you can, try to finish all your questions and have 5 minutes left to check your work. If you can have 5 minutes left to check your work, that's really the minimum amount of time that you're going to want to have left. You want to have at least 5 minutes left to check your work, ideally 10 to 8. So what are you going to check in those final minutes? So you have this time left now to check your work. So now what does that mean? What are you going to do with it? Well, you don't want to just sit there. That's the last thing you want to do. Anytime that you're taking the SAT, the last thing you want to do is just sit there. Okay, that's being stagnant, and that's being, in my opinion, that is kind of being lazy, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're taking advantage of all the time the SAT is giving you, because it costs money to take the test, unless you have a fee waiver. And either way, you're taking 3 hours out of your day to go take the test. And that time is money. We all know that. So you want to make sure that you're really taking advantage of all the time that you're in there for the SAT. So what are we going to check in the final minutes? Okay, the number one thing that you should check is you should check your bubble sheet. Okay, so checking your bubble sheet, I want to quick jump down to number 8 here and explain what I mean by this, because I actually have a strategy for bubbling, and that'll kind of help clarify what I mean by number 1 and 2 there. So let's go ahead and cover this real quick. So what do I mean by checking your bubble sheet and matching the bubble sheet to the booklet? What do I mean by that? Well, if we look at number 8 here, I say the importance of having a watch and bubbling strategy. So I want to cover bubbling strategy real quick. So yes, there is a bubbling strategy that I use and that I recommend people use. And yes, I am a tryhard with the SAT math section. I even have a bubble strategy, right? No, most people don't have a bubbling strategy. I do. Okay. So here's what I recommend for my bubbling strategy, and I'll explain why as well. So I recommend you circle your answer in your booklet, right? So you go through, you solve a problem. Let's say you get the answer is A. You're going to circle A in your answer booklet, or I'm sorry, not in your answer booklet. In your test booklet, you're going to circle A. And then once you've answered all of the questions on that page, so generally there'll be about 4 problems on each page for the Math No Calculator section. Once you've answered the 4 problems on that page or 5 problems on that page, however many problems are on that page, then go ahead and bubble in those, okay? So after you've answered those 4 problems or so, you bubble in all your answers for those 1 through 4. Or those 5 through 8, or whatever the problems are. So you bubble those in on your answer sheet. So why do we do this? Well, we do this because if we're bubbling in each answer after we get it, then we're going to be jumping between our test booklet and our answer sheet multiple times, once after every question. But if we wait and we do it after we answered 4 questions on the same page, then we're taking less time to jump between the two. Okay? Because then we're just looking, we see we have, we go BADA. Then we just quick bubble in BADA, and we only have to switch between our answer sheet and our test booklet once rather than 4 times. So that's saving us time there. Okay, and if you think about that over the course of 20 questions, that's going to save you probably close to a minute. So saving a full minute there just by having a bubbling strategy, I'd say that that's a win, because you didn't really have to do any studying to save that minute. You just saved that minute through strategy. So that's something that I recommend. Now, where does this get tricky? Well, the only way that this really tricks you up is if you don't watch the time towards the end. So let's say that let's say you're struggling to finish all the questions in time. Let's say that you're down to about 1 minute left, right? Or let's say that you're at, let's say you have 10 minutes left or 8 minutes left. Okay, in my opinion, what I mean by having this watch, the importance of having a watch, you should start your watch hand. It has to be mechanical watch, so I always start it at midnight, right? So all my things are going to start at the 12. My second hand, minute hand, and hour hand will start at 12. Okay, so I'll press start, and now once I see that there's about 8 minutes left, or less than 8 minutes left, then after that, I abandon this bubbling strategy where I do I do a page and then answer in everything I had for that page. If there's less than 8 minutes left, then we want to fill it in after each question, because we don't want to get in a situation where we have 1 minute left and we have to try to fill in 4 questions or 4 bubbles, right? Because if our second hand's off, or if the Proctor somehow selects it a couple seconds early, then we might not be able to fill in those 4. And even though we might have gotten those 4 answers correct in our test booklet, that's not going to get scored because we didn't have time to put it in the bubble sheet. So once there's less than 8 minutes left, at that point, you're going to want to fill in the bubble sheet after each question to avoid a situation where you've answered a question correctly but forgot to put it in the test booklet. So for the first 17 minutes of the test, you want to follow this strategy, in my opinion, of answering all the questions on a page, then bubbling them all in. And then once there's less than 8 minutes left, at that point, fill in the bubble sheet after each question. Okay, so that's my bubble sheet strategy. That's what I'd recommend doing. So now we can go back to 5 and I can explain a little bit more what I mean. So we talk about, we got 5 minutes left. Okay, so number 6 here, what to check in the final minutes. Okay, so the number one thing I'm going to recommend you check is you check to make sure that what you have answered in your test booklet matches your bubble sheet. So you're just going to quick run through your booklet, make sure that everything you filled in on your booklet, for example, making sure number 9 matches number 9 in your answer sheet. Number 9 in your booklet matches number 9 in your answer sheet. Number 10 in your booklet matches 10 in your answer sheet. Just making sure that those match because you don't want to accidentally have put in the wrong one. So just making sure that everything you put in your booklet, all the answers you circled there, matches what you put on your bubble sheet. Okay, so after you do that, that should only take you about a minute or less. After that, you're going to want to check your work. Okay, so at that point, check any problems that you were unsure of, check any problems that took a few steps that weren't super simple. Just go through, check everything, make sure it looks good. Make sure you didn't make any simple errors. All right, so then the next thing that I talked about is number 7, right? We skipped down to 8 just because I thought that we should talk about that before 6. But for number 7, I have a very, very key thing here. Be careful, okay? Why do we need to be careful? What do we need to be careful of? Be careful of trying to change an answer with less than a minute left, okay? Let's say that you have an answer choice down. You're going through, you're checking your work. There's about a minute left. You're pretty much checking one of your last problems. Now with a minute left, ideally you would have checked everything. But let's say you're still checking and you say, oh man, I think I might have made a mistake here. Now, if you might have made a mistake and you're not totally sure that you've made that mistake, then don't try to change your answer if there's like 10 seconds left, right? And this is why I recommend starting that watch, that mechanical watch, with the second hand on midnight as well, okay? Now, I know that that's very, very, pretty much a very, very I'm trying to think of a good word here, a very, very strict detail, right? Starting that second hand at midnight, but doing so is really going to make sure that you understand if you've got a minute left and you started your second hand at midnight, then you're going to know exactly how many seconds you have left. So you'll know if you have time to quick change it with your answer sheet. So that's why I recommend starting your hour hand, minute hand, and second hand at that midnight, because then you can really, really know how much time you have left down to the second. So if you got 30 seconds, you can probably quick erase an answer on your answer sheet and quick put in the other bubble. So that's why you got to make sure that you're just careful, because if you've only got 5 seconds, you might be able to erase, but you might not be able to fill in. So just be careful trying to change answers with less than a minute left. It's certainly still possible to do, especially if you started your watch at midnight with the second hand as well, because then you can see how many seconds you have left. So that's one tip there. So with that, that really covers pretty much all of the pacing that we're going to want to know for that SAT Math No Calculator section. Okay, so the big things that you should really put in your notes if you're taking notes on this, in my opinion, would be, first of all, understanding how the difficulty of the questions are arranged. Now keep in mind, you can put in this equivalency chart that I basically made if you want. Keep in mind it's my opinion. Okay, this is my opinion. So I would put that in if you want. But the big thing that you really want to understand is just this approach that I recommend. Okay, so I'm going to put a big star here. Okay, that's the big thing I'd put in your notes if I were you, is just the approach that I suggest taking. So I'd include this 1 through 3 and then this A through B, right, of that 3, as well as these right here. So that's what I recommend there. I would make sure that you really put that approach in your notes if you want to adopt it. And then you don't really have to include why the approach is smart if you included that equivalency table, right, because you'll understand that, and I explained that to you. And then other than that, just make sure that you try to have some time left to check your work. Make sure you're checking your bubble sheet when you have that time left. Another tip that I think is important is just making sure you're starting your watch with everything at midnight. I think that that's important as well. All right, let's get started with the writing and language section for today. So today we're going to be working from SAT Practice Test 2. We're going to be doing questions 23 to 44, focusing on teaching you what to look for as far as questions. So how to identify question types. Once you identify kind of what the question is asking, how you can get rid of wrong answer choices, understanding grammar rules, because that's really important, understanding tone, how to maintain tone, how to find correct word replacement, things like that. So still largely focusing on teaching you how to find the correct answer rather than pacing right now. We'll worry more about pacing in a couple of days or a few days, but for now, still focused on teaching you accuracy with the SAT writing section and teaching you grammar rules, because those are really the most important things of the SAT writing section. And once you understand that, then that pacing becomes a lot easier. So understanding this accuracy is the first important step. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Environmentalist otters. It has long been known that sea otters living along the west coast of North America help keep kelp forests and their habitat healthy and vital. Okay, that right there, there's nothing wrong with it, so our answer would be no change. As far as why the other answer choices are wrong, let's go ahead and cover that. Option B, living along the west coast of North America, they help. Well, a couple of things that are wrong here. We don't want to repeat the word they because we already said sea otters, so that gets rid of B. Okay, it also gets rid of D because we repeat they as well right there. Option C, that live along the west coast of North America and help to keep forests and their habitat healthy and vital. Well, we wouldn't say and help. Okay, if we're going to say it has been long known that sea otters that live along the west coast of North America, we wouldn't say and help. We would have to get rid of and just say help to keep kelp forests and their habitat healthy and vital. So the fact that we have the word and there is what makes C incorrect. All right, 24, which choice is offering accurate interpretation? Well, let's go ahead and read down to there. We have, they do this by feeding on sea urchins and other herbivorous invertebrates that graze voraciously on kelp. With sea otters to keep the population of sea urchins in check, kelp forests can flourish. In fact, okay, now I need an accurate interpretation, so we're just going to have to go A through D till we find an accurate interpretation. In fact, 2 years or less of sea otters can completely eliminate sea urchins in a coastal area. I see sea urchins as this darker gray box. I see that when we have otters present for 2 years or less, it does not completely reduce them, so A is wrong, but it does reduce them dramatically, but they're not completely reduced, so A is wrong. Option B, even 2 years or less of sea otter presence can reduce the sea urchin threat. Yes, that is accurate, so our answer is going to be B. All right, now we got 25. I see without sea otters present, that's my introductory dependent clause. Then I have a comma there, and then a comma after, which is indicating to me that this is non-essential. And then we have kelp forests run the danger of becoming barren stretches of coastal wasteland known as urchin barrens. Now, anytime I have two commas like this, where these arrows are pointing, okay, anytime I have both those commas, I know what's between it is non-essential. Now, if it's one word like this, then I'm looking to connect either my preceding sentence or my preceding clause, like this clause here, to what's to come. So either my preceding sentence or my preceding clause to this right here, right, my independent clause. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. So we know that what came before in that previous sentence was talking about kelp forests flourishing, right? We see that. I'll put that in green right here so you can see that. Talking about kelp forests flourishing. And we know down here we're talking about them not flourishing but becoming barren stretches of coastal wasteland. So that's a contrast. So we're going to look for a contrast word. We see our only contrast word is however. Hence, likewise, and nevertheless are not contrast words. So our answer there is going to be B. All right, now we can go ahead and move on. We got question 26. Okay, I see I have a 1 here. Whenever I have a 1 here, that means I'm going to go find what I'm asked to add. Go down and find that question. I told where is the most logical place in the paragraph to add the following sentence? What Wilmers and S discovered in their study therefore surprised them. Okay, so we want to talk about some study before it. Okay, and then we want to talk about some surprising findings after it. Okay, so ideally we'd be talking about what they expect from the study before it. Right, so something saying that they expect this to happen, but they're surprised when some surprising results happen. All right, so we're going to try and place that as we go through. Okay, so we have what was less well known until recently, at least, was how this relationship among sea otter, sea urchins, and kelp forests might help fight global warming. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased 40%. Should we add this part right here since the start of the Industrial Revolution, resulting in global temperatures? Yes, because that tells us in what time period has it increased 40%. Okay, so our answer there is going to have to be answer choice A, because A says yes because it establishes the relationship between the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and global warming, right? It's telling us this relationship and how it helps fight this global warming. So it's connecting those two ideas. Also, we do need to have some sort of time period as well. Since we're saying it increased 40%, we need to know from when to when since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Option B, yes, because it explains the key role sea otter, sea urchins, and kelp forests play in combating global warming. No, it's more so because it's explaining that relationship between CO2 and global warming. So our answer there is going to be A. All right, now we got question 27. A recent studies by 2 professors at the University of California, Santa Cruz, Chris Wilmers and James S. suggests, and then we have a comma here. Okay, we do not need a comma there, right? It's just suggests that kelp. Okay, so just get rid of that comma. nothing there. It should just say suggests and then that. There's no need for anything in between that. Okay, that one right there is just making sure that you're not adding things in when they don't need to be in. So our answer for 27 is going to be D. All right, next up we've got protected by sea otters can absorb as much as 12 times the amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as those where sea urchins are allowed to devour the kelp. Okay, that one right there, it's one word in the middle, so I'm probably looking at a tone question. I see I am because these are all different words here, but they're in the same tense. Okay, we would say that they devour the kelp. We wouldn't say dispatch kelp, overindulge on kelp, or dispose kelp because that would ruin our academic tone. The correct word here would be devour. It provides an accurate meaning with the correct tone. All right, question 4. Like their terrestrial plant. Okay, in this case, if I have a pronoun underlined in the middle of my sentence, I'm looking to match it to whatever its subject is in number. So I want to make sure that it's correct in number. Also, possession is the other thing I'm looking at. So like their terrestrial plant cousins, kelp removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So in this case, it's kelp's terrestrial plant cousins. Now, kelp is singular. Okay, it's also possessive because it owns these terrestrial plant cousins. So I need a singular and a possessive word, which is going to be its. Okay, keep in mind that this its right here, this D, that would be it is, okay, which is not possessive. So our answer there is going to be C, its. So that's answer choice C for number 29. Okay, now we've got question, we keep going down. We've got scientists knew this. Okay, keep in mind, I talked about how they were expecting something from a study, right? They knew something, but did not recognize how large a role they played in helping keep kelp forests significantly decrease the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay, what do I see is wrong right here? Well, I don't know who this they is. Who is it referring to? Is it referring to the scientists or to the sea otters? We have to specify because if we say they here, we don't know who it's referring to. So A is going to be wrong. B, it, we don't know what that's referring to. We need C, how large a role sea otters played because that's telling us who it's referring to. So our answer for 30 is going to have to be C. All right, now we've got question 31, right? So I talked about how we wanted to say something about expecting a study, right? Expecting something to happen before we include this sentence here. And then we want to talk about some surprising results after. So let's see if we have surprising results after sentence 5. Because we already talked about what it expected in sentence 5, right? Scientists knew something, okay? So now in sentence 6 we say, far from making no difference to the ecosystem, the presence of otters was found to increase carbon storage of kelp forests by 4.4 to 8.7 megatons annually, offsetting the amount of carbon dioxide emitted by 3 million to 6 million passenger cars each year. Okay, that right there, that's surprising results, and before we had an expected study, that's going to be answer then sentence 5. Okay, so our answer for 31 then is going to be D. All right, now we've got question 32. Okay, Wilmers and S caution, however, that, and then something here, having more otters. Okay, that does not match my academic tone. This one we want to make sure we're matching our academic tone and being concise. Okay, saying having more otters does not match our tone. Increasing the otter population, that does match our tone. It's also concise. So B will be our correct answer for 32. We wouldn't say the otters multiplying, and we wouldn't say having more otters than other locations. Increasing the otter population, that matches our tone, and that is also concise. All right, next we have will not automatically solve the problem of higher levels of carbon dioxide in the air, but they suggest that the presence of otters provides a good model of how carbon can be sequestered. Okay, when we say or removed after sequestered, anytime that we have some challenging word, and then a comma, and then the word or, and then a synonym that is another word for whatever this previous word was, that's really just giving a definition in case people don't know what sequestered is. So if we're going to do that and we start with a comma, we treat it as a non-essential because it is non-essential. So since it's non-essential, we're going to have to offset it with another comma since we used a comma before it. Okay, so we can't use a semicolon there. It's going to have to be a comma. So we'll have sequestered, comma, or removed, comma, from the atmosphere. So our correct answer there is going to be answer choice sequestered or removed, and then a comma. So our answer there is going to be D for number 33. Okay, sequestered, comma, or removed, that comma, and then from. All right, so that takes us through that first passage. Let's just go back, make sure we answered all of our questions. Quick check. It looks like we did. So now we're on to passage 4 in this section, or this practice test. So we have a quick fix and a throwaway culture. Planned obsolescence, a practice which, we don't need to say the word at. We see we don't have which. We wouldn't say from which either. We also wouldn't say so that, right? I just got rid of it and said which. You could also say whereby, okay? So that's going to be our correct answer there. It's going to be D for number 34. So whereby products are designed to have a limited period of usefulness. Okay, right here I know that it's going to have to be a comma Because I see I have a comma here, I know that this is a non-essential phrase or clause because if I take it out, it still makes sense. It would read, planned obsolescence has been a cornerstone of manufacturing strategy for the past 80 years. Since I used a comma up top for my non-essential, I have to have a comma down here, so my correct answer is going to be A for number 35. All right, number 36, this approach increases sales but also stands in austere contrast. No, it stands in stark contrast, okay? If we're going to describe a contrast, the word stark would be the word we're going to want to use. That's really a tone question, also a bit of a meaning question as well, understanding the meaning of words. We would say it stands in stark contrast to a time when goods were produced to be durable, right? Producing these goods that are not durable, it's a stark contrast to when they were durable. So answer there is going to have to be answer choice D. Okay, we wouldn't say an egregious contrast, because that doesn't fit our tone, or an unmitigated contrast, or an austere contrast. None of those fit with our academic tone. They also don't really provide great meaning for what type of contrast it is. Okay, the best word to describe that type of contrast there is going to be stark, because we're providing back when they were durable versus now when they are not. So that's a stark contrast. Planned obsolescence wastes materials as well as energy in making and shipping new products. It also reinforces the belief that it's easier to replace goods than to mend them. As repair shops are rare, okay, now we're asked for what's providing the best, or which choice provides information that best supports the claim made by the sentence. All right, our claim is that it's reinforcing the belief that it's easier to replace goods than to mend them, as repair shops are rare and repair methods are often specialized. Okay, that answer there, A, is going to be correct. So why is A correct? Well, repair methods being specialized means that it's often going to be easier to replace them than travel all the way to find somewhere where it's a specialized repair shop, because that specialized repair shop is likely to be far away from where you are and it's likely to be expensive. Okay, so our answer there would be A. That's showing how it's difficult. It's more difficult to mend something than to buy it again. Option B, obsolete goods can become collectibles. We don't make that claim. Also, it doesn't support the claim we made previously in that sentence. C, no one knows whether something will fall into disrepair again. We don't make that claim early in that sentence. D, new designs often have bugs that must be worked out. Also doesn't support the claim we made in that first part of our sentence. In 2009, an enterprising movement, the Repair Cafe, challenged this widely accepted belief. Okay, I see I have a 1 here, so I'm going to go find the sentence I have to place, figure out what should come before it, what should come after it. So I'm asked about sentence 5. Where should it be placed? Well, let's go take a look at sentence 5. We see that it's right here. Since the inaugural Repair Cafe, so I need to have this inaugural Repair Cafe come before the sentence. Others have been hosted in theater foyers, community centers, hotels, and auditoriums. So I need to talk about this expansion into other areas afterwards. All right, so let's go back. Let's go ahead and start reading through. So we have more like a fair than an actual cafe. Okay, first thing I see right immediately is going to be that fair right there and this than. Okay, so this is a homophone question. Homophone question, testing our ability to recognize homophones and their different meanings. Okay, so what we need to understand here is that the word fair, if we're talking about a fair, as in like a gathering of people, sort of like a fair where you would have pigs and horses and things like that, that type of fair is going to be this right here. Okay. Option C, this type of fair that I'm boxing, F-A-R-E, that's the type of fare as in a fee for some service, like a bus fare, right? A bus fare, how much money it costs you to take a bus somewhere. So something like that. So C is incorrect because it uses the wrong fare. Now, the word than, okay? T-H-A-N is what we need to use because we're comparing that fare to a cafe. So T-H-A-N is the word that is used to compare two different things. So D is wrong because it uses the wrong then. A is wrong because it uses the wrong then. Our answer then is going to be B for number 38. All right, now we got question 39. It was the brainchild of former journalist Martin Postma who wanted to take a practical stand. Okay. Anytime that we say someone and then we use a comma and then we go on to talk about them and something that's non-essential, we're going to want to use a comma and then say who, since it was a person that came before it. So I take a look at that and I see I have who wanted, answer choice C. So 39 there, answer is going to be C. Sentence 3. Her goals were straightforward. Okay, we wouldn't say her goals were straightforward and then say however, we would just say straightforward. Okay, because both of those are connecting words basically, and we wouldn't want to use two of them back to back because that would be not concise, and we want to be concise, right? We want to avoid repetition or redundancy, so we're going to get rid of however. Her goals were straightforward. We're going to need to have a colon because we're introducing a list, so reduce waste, maintain and perpetuate knowledge and skills and strengthen community. So we need to have a colon because we need a list. We see all of them have colons, but options A, B, and C all have two of those connecting words, which we don't want. So our answer there is going to be D for number 40. All right, now we go down. Okay, keep in mind we still want to think about, I believe it's sentence 5. We want to think about where we're going to place that, right? So we want to talk about how we have an inaugural cafe before it, and then afterwards we want to talk about it expanding into different areas. So we just talked about someone's goals, okay? Now, we're really looking for a spot. We see in 42, there's no direction. It just says to make it most logical. So if we're thinking about logical, right, we just talked about in sentence 3 the goals of this, right? Reducing waste, maintaining and perpetuating knowledge and skills, and strengthening community. Okay, now keep in mind what came before this is all of those introductory words really talking about what that first inaugural cafe was, right? They're making it the brainchild of this former journalist, right? He makes this happen. We're talking about the goals of it. So really all of this is referring to that first one that happened, right? It's the first inaugural cafe. So it's really referring to that first cafe or fair that they had where they focused on repairing things. So we're really looking to place this after sentence 3 then, but we want to understand what comes after and make sure it matches up to an expansion, right? So we have 4. Participants bring all manners of damaged articles, clothing, appliances, furniture, and more to be repaired by a staff of volunteer specialists, including tailors, electricians, and carpenters. Okay, well, that would require expansion. In order to have all of these different occupations there, that would be an indication of expansion. Okay, so at that point, they've expanded beyond the first one, and now they have much, much more participants, bringing much, much more of a variety of items, and they also have a full staff of volunteer specialists. So that's indicating to me that there's expansion there. So my answer then should be after sentence 3, which is option C for number 42. Okay, so 42 answer there should be C. So now let's go back up. Let's answer 41. So we've got, we just answered the straightforward one. So now we're going down, going down, going down. We have others have been hosted in theater foyers, community centers, hotels, and auditoriums. Well, they await for their service. No, it should just be, well, they wait for their service. Or while waiting for their service is even better. Okay, because then we don't say the word they and then say the word patrons. Okay, because then we're repeating that subject twice and we don't want to do that. So the answer with they is actually incorrect. Because if we say, well, they wait, or well, they waited, or well, they await for their service, and then we say the word patrons, then we're repeating that subject twice, which we don't want to do. So A is wrong for that reason, C is wrong for that reason. Now we wouldn't say well awaiting for service, we would just say well waiting for service. So our answer for that question is going to be D. That one right there is testing if we're getting rid of that repetition of the word subject, right? If we're going to use they and then say the word patrons, we're repeating a subject twice, which we don't want to do. So that's why A and C are wrong. And then after that, it's a question of being idiomatic between option B and option D, right? We wouldn't say well awaiting, we would say well waiting. Okay, so that takes us through 41. We already answered 42, so now we're on to the next page. Though only about 3% of the Netherlands' municipal waste ends up in landfills, repair cafes still raise awareness about what otherwise be mindless acts of waste by providing a venue for people to share and learn valuable skills that are in danger of being lost. At this point, we're considering adding the following sentence. As the number of corporate and service-based jobs has increased, the need for people who work with their hands has diminished. Okay, on the surface, or at least as far as we are in this paragraph, that's unrelated. So far in this paragraph, that's unrelated. Let's see if we talk about it in our next sentence. It is easy to classify old but fixable items as junk in an era that places great emphasis on the next big thing. That is not touching on the need for people who work with their hands. So at this point, nothing in our paragraph has said that, therefore it's unrelated and we don't want to add it. So should we make this addition? The answer is going to be no. And the answer is going to be no because it's blurring the paragraph's focus by introducing a topic that's not further explained. Okay, option C, because it contradicts the claims made in the rest of the paragraph, it never contradicts a claim, so that's why D is wrong. So our answer for 43 is going to be C. All right, question 44. We have, though the concept remained a local trend at first, international repair cafes, all affiliated with the Dutch Repair Cafe via the website, have arisen in France, Germany, South Africa, the United States, and other countries on top of that. Okay, this is redundant. Okay, it's redundant and repetitive. Why is the word on top of that redundant and repetitive? Well, we just listed countries and said and other countries. If we say on top of that, we already know it's on top of that because we said other countries. So that would be repeating it. Same thing with in addition and likewise. That would be repetitive and redundant. We want to avoid repetition and redundancy at all costs. So our answer for 44 then is going to be answer choice D. All right, so hopefully that was helpful. As always, make sure to stay tuned in for tomorrow's lesson. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, there'll be a donation link in the description when it's up and running. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Any private SAT tutoring I'm doing will be linked in the description. Any private college admissions consulting I'm doing will be linked in the description. As always, make sure to have a good day.